everyone is unique right now. Everyone has a unique situation. It's not cookie cutter. And so responsible use is finding out what it means for you.
Technology is transforming how we think, how we lead, and how we win. From Intervision, this is Status Go, the show helping IT leaders move beyond the status quo, master their craft, and propel their IT vision.
Welcome to another episode of the Status Go podcast, where we navigate the ever evolving landscape of technology and its impacts on our organizations. Today, we're diving into the realm of artificial intelligence. It's kind of been the rage for the last 12, 13, 14 months. But what we want to explore today is that age old question with a twist: to AI or not to AI? That is the question. I'm your host, Jeff Tunn, and joining me are two esteemed guests: Alina Walters, the Chief Information Officer of the City of Lakewood, Colorado, and Aleta Jeffress, the Senior Vice President of CGI. They've been on the show before, and I know that we're going to have a great conversation. Anytime we get the three of us together, it seems like we could talk forever. But together today, we'll be unraveling the complexities of AI adoption and its usage, shedding a light on how organizations can leverage this technology responsibly and effectively. In our discussion, we'll be drawing on a couple of different things. One is Alita's company, CGI, is holding an AI summit, and some of the topics that they'll be talking about there, we'll kind of touch on those today. But also, in addition to that, Alina has written a draft white paper policy document that she's using there at Lakewood. And so we'll kind of explore both of those to see what elements you can take out as you begin to decide your AI future. So, if you're a technology professional navigating the waves of AI innovation, join us as we embark on this journey to demystify AI and uncover how it can shape the future of our organizations. It's time to answer that question: to AI or not to AI? Let's find out together. Alina, welcome back to Status Go.
Thank you. It's so good to be back, Jeff. Hi, Alita. Thank you for having us once again. And I'm excited to talk about this. There's so much to unravel. I love that you use the word demystify because sometimes it seems like it's a mystery every day just because it's changing so quickly. So you don't know what you're in for day after day. But I do believe we're on the right track for making some headway with using this amazing technology responsibly.
Well, and uh, we've seen this in a lot of different technologies, and it seems like AI, we're seeing it more than we have in some other things. This almost A or B. A, I'm going to use it, I'm all in, or B, I'm not going to let anybody in our organizations touch it. Alita, in your work, have you seen that it's almost divided in half between the audiences that you work with?
I've seen quite a gamut of things actually in the last couple of months. I think that some of the organizations that we've worked with are simply so they want to engage with it, they want to be able to use it, but they struggle either with the use cases or even if they know what they want to be able to do, they know that their data isn't in a place to support that. And so then they become conflicted, right? That now I have to spend time and energy to fix the data, which could be a bigger problem than
Yeah.
maybe they even realized. But yet they want to be able to move forward with AI. So there are some small things, as we all know, you can use AI for just about anything anymore. Alina uses it for recipes. I love that. But there's so many different facets of it. So do we start small or do we fix a bigger problem? I think it depends on making sure that people know what they want the outcome of it to be and how do they really want to go about that. And I think that's an important question that some people embrace and some people really are still kind of afraid of.
Yeah, I think the fear, I guess, to use that word is probably justified. This is kind of a
Mhm.
new animal that when you think about AI and the its ability to go pretty nuts pretty quickly. Um, but I also think that there's some that are a little bit, they're not the early adopters. They're more the I hate the term laggards, but um, uh, that's kind of how they're defined in the hype cycle, right? Laggards, where they're waiting to see what happens. Alina, you've kind of taken an approach there at Lakewood of you're going to hit it head on. Can you talk a little bit about your journey about discovering AI? Right, I'm going to use air quotes that no one can see, but discovering AI, and then trying to make sure that the city government and its agencies are using it in an appropriate manner.
Yeah, the word journey is perfect because I do believe everyone is on their own unique journey based on the organization they're with, based on the type of work that they do, based on their risk tolerance level. And I think that's what it comes down to, right? So when we think about that hype cycle that you mentioned, the quote unquote laggards, I see that as more conservative risk management, right? Because, and rightfully so, because there are so many hidden and really unexplored consequences, right? There's ethical use that you have to think about, intellectual property rights, data privacy and security, bias, fairness. There's things like social and psychological impact, and a whole slew of other big words like that. So it's a serious topic. I understand the conservative approach to it. Like you said, though, here at Lakewood, I believe we are poised to embrace it. It's just that we want to do it in a responsible way, right? So already I know people are using it for many personal uses, and personal can range from, as Alita said, that banana bread recipe, which I highly recommend looking up because it turned out amazing, um, to using it to maybe um, take some research that you're doing and asking for some key points out of it, right? That can save you some time in distilling a lot of information down to key points. So people are already using it in that way. And then there's the contributing to the industry way where agencies are taking AI and building it into their platforms so that the products that they deliver leverage this amazing technology, right? And you do have to be ready for that. Your data has to be ready for that. And there are so many things to consider. So back to your question, for us, I'm what I'm eager about is building some guidelines that we can talk about at the city. Right now, they're just in draft form. We're still working on it, and I will be sharing them with our leadership team so that we can understand, talk about, and really see what is that pace of adoption that we want to make.
Alita, what are you seeing? I know your focus is uh, predominantly on the public sector, but I also think you get involved with some private companies as well. Are you seeing a difference in the level of innovation or the desire to really dive into this to change a culture, change a company between public and private?
You know, not really. I think it really depends on the organization and, as we've kind of talked about, what's their appetite for AI. And so obviously commercial or private sector, right, they might be able to maybe move a little more quickly just depending on their structure and what they're interested in. But then I do think there are some more challenges, right, about how do they use that? How quickly do they use that? Do they deliver it as part of their offering, right? There's as Alina mentioned, there's some security, there's some ethical considerations when you start to get into how are you deploying that right to your customer base, and or maybe you're building it into your IP solution, right? There's a lot of
Yeah.
different things to consider when you're talking about that generative AI. I think on the public sector side, a lot of it maybe is more around the efficiency, because that's typically what public sector is trying to do. How can they deliver services more efficiently, more effectively? Maybe they're not really building IP, but they can certainly look at their processes and determine how can we be more efficient, not only from automation, which I feel like sometimes is kind of that step one that
Yeah.
people need
Yeah.
to consider, when they're considering AI, but truly, how are they going to use an AI platform that will help constituents be better served or have a better experience, when dealing with their local government or local agencies. So I think it's the level of innovation and just the appetite to move those things forward. I also think, when CGI talks about AI, we help people break it down into a number of different thought processes, right? So if you're going to innovate, what are you really trying to do? What's your vision for that? And how are you going to launch that? Where do you really want to be? That applies kind of across the board. And then, as I'm sure we'll talk about, there's other iterations, right, as you start to move through that process. So, depending on how much you want to experiment with it, and then how much are you really going to engineer it. And then, as you continue to go, usually once you do that and figure out what works for you and what your tolerance is, then you're going to expand it, right? So a lot of
Yeah.
e words to help you as you're using generative AI. So but I think it depends on the leader and the level of innovation and how much they're really willing to kind of push the envelope and move
Yeah.
forward.
Well, and it raises the question. For some reason, this technology more than some of the others that we've seen over the last decade or so raises this question of responsible use. What is responsible use? How do you define that in your organizations? Either one of you.
I'm gonna say that from my perspective, you have to balance, right, that goal of efficiency, gained efficiencies, and enhanced productivity with an over reliance on these tools that can have really unpredicted outcomes and vulnerabilities.
Mhm.
And so the responsible use is making it making it work for your business. And this is what I believe Alita was saying.
Mhm.
What are some use cases that make sense? And start small, see what that looks like. Educate, right? So you have to be in a cycle, in a continuous cycle of learning, envisioning, experimenting, learning, envisioning, experimenting, so that you can define your guardrails of what responsible is. And to Alita's point, that can vary on that risk tolerance that each
Yeah.
organization has based on their leadership, based on what they're trying to accomplish with their product offerings, and based on the types of people that they employ, and all those things, right? So I,
Yeah.
I don't know that there's everyone is unique right now. Everyone has a unique situation.
Yeah.
It's not cookie cutter.
Yeah.
And so responsible use is finding out what it means for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Well, and I think I would add to that, responsible use is really, I still think it has to come back to some of the human factor. Because if you let AI kind of run on its own, the one thing, that AI doesn't always
Yep.
take into account is context. And so you still have to have the human part of it come back and check the context. So when Alina and I were talking about AI a week or so ago, right? It the example she used was, you might give AI a picture of a brown cow, in a field, right? So everybody can picture that. Well, as AI iterates, or sometimes even fraudulently iterates, right, over those types
hallucinates.
of
Yeah.
things, what you might end up with is like a purse and some grass. You know? So you have to still come back into it and say, is this still the right thing? It kind of, I liken it back to the old days, right? You played telephone, right? And the person that started the chain with this sentence was certainly not what ended up, 50 people later. So it's that same
Yeah.
cycle, I guess, making sure that what you're putting in, you're still taking the time to validate that. You're making sure that you're really getting the outcomes that you want. Because if it starts to deviate, it's not going to know. You still need to come in and make sure that you're getting what you thought you were getting. And whether that's servicing constituents or IP or customers, whatever that is, you're still ultimately responsible for that.
We seem to forget that human oversight still has to be part of the process, part of the checks and balances, right? Because it does tend to hallucinate at times and make up facts. And while I'm sure iterations in the future are going to be better at that, it reminds me of a conversation I had with Deal Daly here on this program. Deal is the CIO of Toysmith, and he talked about the that it's almost this living, breathing organism. It's not like putting a new storage array into your infrastructure. You're putting something in there that evolves and learns, and so it kind of blows up this notion of change control because it's changing all the time. How do you handle that, Alina and Alita? How do you counsel your clients to handle this ever changing process of AI?
It comes down to something very basic, I believe, with data: garbage in, garbage out. So if you approach it in that way, then you can better manage how you use it and what the outcomes are. You do have to apply that human
Hmm.
context. That's huge. And you know, I'm I don't believe that can be replaced because that's unique to each of us, and that's what makes us amazing
Yeah.
creatures, right? We have this ability um, to think and reason and judge, and I AI is more of an equation,
Hmm.
right? So it's going to take a while. I don't know when and how for it to be like a human. So um, I think it's important to know what you're putting in as data. I think you have to validate it. You have to and understand where it's wrong so you can
Yeah.
avoid
Yeah.
biases.
Yeah, and I think along with that comes that whole experiment phase, right? We've talked about that, learning from that. So you're always going to have to continue
Yeah.
to tweak and continue to monitor. But being able to experiment with it, that's where you find out data's good, data's not good. So now what do I need to go change? Is my outcome what I expected? No. So now I need to go change. The human oversight
Yeah.
factor, right? I now have a purse instead of a cow. I need to go make a change. So all those things come back to making sure that you're iterative. And, like we've said, it's not a static thing. You're not
Yeah.
just plugging it in and walking away. It really needs some constant care and feeding.
Yeah, and you really have to think about, again, the use cases, right? Where are you going to use it? Because I really see the pendulum kind of swinging. Oh, AI, it's great. It can do so many things for us. It can answer all these questions. It can be that immediate first source of knowledge. But the people who go to that can really get tired
Yeah.
of that and really may swing back to saying, I just want to kind of talk and think this through with another human. I'm not looking for a black and white answer. I want to
Yeah.
reason and brainstorm. And while AI can likely reason and brainstorm, it is a very different interaction when it's human to human. And I'm curious to see how the pendulum is going to swing
Yeah.
back and forth, right, through these iterations with people using it, relying on it, overusing it, over relying on it, not wanting to use it,
Yeah.
learning from it. Um, it's yeah, it's fascinating.
It reminds me of the cloud, right? Because part of what we're seeing today, and I saw a couple of posts on LinkedIn about this last week about repatriation, where you're bringing the your cloud workloads back in because you went all in without a plan or without a vision, perhaps, and found out, oops, it can be expensive if you don't
Hmm.
put controls around it. Now we're seeing the same kind of thing with AI, right? That pendulum back and forth.
Yep.
I love that visual of the pendulum. Alina, when you sat down to start this policy document, this white paper that I referenced earlier, how did you get started? What were you what were the steps you were trying to take at the beginning of that?
Education. I wanted to think through what I was writing about and
So
why.
education on your own of yourself in
Yes,
part. Yeah.
education of myself, thinking, no question is a bad question. And usually when you ask a question, somebody else is thinking about it. So going through that process of educating myself is something that I believe everyone will need to do and want to do and should do in order to get to that responsible use.
Yeah.
So there's so much information out there, it can be overwhelming. Every day there's, podcasts like this one,
Not as good
articles.
as this one,
Yeah,
but
of
there are
course, of
podcasts out
course.
there, right?
There are articles, there are webinars, there are, I mean, you name it. It, it's too much, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I wanted to start with understanding what does it mean for me and how do I want to talk about it to generate excitement and help drive responsible use.
Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
think as an IT organization, that is our responsibility to introduce and provide a safe way to experiment, like Alita was saying, to learn and to course correct and to build on. So
Yeah.
that's where I started.
Alita, how about you? How have you attacked your own personal edification about AI, generative AI specifically? But what are some of the things you have done?
Well, I think just like Alina, right? It's been a lot of self education. I attended did a course the other day, and even then, even out of a kind of a introductory 30-minute course, right? There were still things that I learned and nuggets that I took away that I was like, oh, well, this makes sense now. I mean, it's you're just layering it right on
Yeah.
top of everything, and it moves so quickly that you need to always look for new content, it seems like, because
Yeah.
things change. It's always changing. There's something new to think about, there's another security thing to think about, or there's another use case that comes up that maybe I didn't consider before. So I think just the continuing to learn kind of on your own about that,
Yeah.
and looking into where does it really make sense for me. So one of my goals, right, is to use it more personally. Well, what does that look like? Is
Yeah.
that um, back to the recipe example, right? Is it that? Is it project management? Is it, what could, different things you can type into Chat GBT and see what you come back with, and it's all fascinating. I mean,
Yeah. It is.
really
It is.
fascinating. So I just think making sure it almost reminds me, when security was kind of a thing coming out, we always said, well, that's the IT department or that's the security department. And now what
Yeah.
is it? Well, now it's baked into everything that we
Mhm.
do, right? We know not to open the phishing email or the text from the post office, right? Those types of things. So I think that that's the same thing that will happen to AI. It will become more and more embedded in what we do. And so we'll learn how to use it and we'll learn how to manage it, but we're just not to that point yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are so many exciting uses, and we also have it for our kids, for example, right? They can go and say, "Hey, tutor me in eighth grade geometry. Give
Yeah.
me 10 quiz questions on such and such. Help me learn, the top 5 things I need to know in this course." Like they can be quizzed. It can be used as a tutor. It can be, so that's a way to use it personally. At the same time, I think we have to teach our kids, hey, don't put personal information in there because you don't know how that can be extracted and used against you,
Yeah.
right? Because unfortunately, with everything good, there's like five things that can be
Which we
not
see
so good.
daily. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
When your kid's using it to write his research papers or
Right.
what, right? I mean, that's kind of the guardrail, then the human intervention
Yeah.
we talked about a little bit.
Yeah. I'm
So,
sure your kids are not doing that, right? I
oh
No,
mean,
no, no,
no.
never.
well, I loved what you're talking about, how fast it's evolving and layering on. Um, we've talked about this before, that about a year ago, I did a podcast episode where I interviewed ChatGPT, which was text based, and then took the output, fed it through a text to speech generator to create an audio. I saw a demo just last Friday of a company that has developed a prototype of a person's image that is AI behind it, and you can talk to it and have a conversation with it, and it will answer you. I mean, it's limited on what topics it can cover right now, but you can have this conversation with AI now. I mean, that's pretty wild when you think about uh, being in customer support, or being in where you've got constituents in your districts that are interacting with the government, and now you can have uh, an an avatar, I suppose is the right word for it, that is responding in a human empathetic way to their questions. Is that where this is going next, do you think?
That's exciting stuff. I love it. I mean, think of the impacts that could have, right? In from a health perspective, right? People who have various disabilities could potentially um, not have those challenges, right? Or
Yeah.
they could be
Yeah.
treated in different ways. I joke it can be used from, a banana bread recipe to figuring out how do you live forever, right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
obviously we're not there, but the uses are so exciting, and everything is new now because it's new. But as with everything, after a few iterations, it becomes the norm. So our
Yeah.
baseline of what that norm is in across industries and uses is exponentially growing every day, and our tolerance of what's possible is expanding.
Yeah.
And I know I love that. That's exciting
Yeah.
for me. It's scary and
Yeah.
complicated,
Yeah.
but it's really exciting.
Yeah.
I think too, with that comes my brain goes to the part of that you have to think about the liability associated with that as well.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
not only, yes, it is definitely cool, and there are so many just amazing things that could come out of that, but then ultimately who's liable for that?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Driverless cars, right? As much as the hype was there, and there's lots of AI built into that, we're not really there. I mean, you
Right.
still don't see, empty cars driving down the street as much as I think people thought you would.
Yeah.
So I think that that's the component that still remains, and it'll just take time. I mean, look at all the jokes about arguing with Siri and Alexa and things like that, right? We've come a long way from there, and the information I feel like is way more valuable and applicable. But I
Yeah.
still think there's going to be that component of how are we making sure that we're really getting the right
Right.
thing, and who's really liable if people make decisions based on that data.
Yeah, you think about like social media, right? When it came out and everybody was like putting everything out there. Every 5 minutes, whatever they were doing, it was
Right.
advertised. And how that has evolved. And then people started questioning, well, is this real what I'm seeing on social media? Is
Right.
it not? And then they started making choices. I don't want to see this. I only want to see this. So it's that same journey.
Yeah.
It, yeah.
I love that, and I think while it feels that technology is evolving so fast, it is in some ways, but in other ways, as you were talking about, Alita, it is a little bit slower than it feels like sometimes. we don't see a lot of cars driving around without drivers. I think we'll get there eventually, but I mean, just like yesterday was the Super Bowl, and one of the ads was for a cell phone that a visually impaired person could take pictures with because it told them what it was seeing in the camera lens. That to me goes back to what you were accessibility and how this
Right.
technology can be used for
Hmm.
the greater good
Yeah.
in things. So before we get to our closing question that you all know that I love to ask, I want to ask where you two are going next in your AI journey. So, Alita, what's up for you next as you continue to explore this new world of generative AI and large language models?
I think there's two things. I think from a kind of corporate perspective, really working with my prospects and my customers to see how can this really benefit them. I mentioned, we're CGI is hosting an AI summit coming up, and so we've brought our experts into our Denver office, and we're really going to have in person
Yeah,
some conversation about what does that look like and how can we help organizations really hone in on their use cases and how do they implement that and what does that really look like. So a lot of education. And some of the things that are really fascinating to me about that is that, we have some organizations that we work with, and just the level of urgency that they have. Think public safety, for example. When you start embedding AI into public safety, where should ambulances be? Where should
yeah,
police officers be? What fire apparatus should be where, right? Just based on what they see with the weather or past history or things like that. I mean, just the application of that can just be enormous, right?
yeah,
So, really thinking about all of those cases and where can we really best benefit our communities, where we
yeah,
live and how they can take care of us. So, I think that's one aspect of it. And then, for me personally, I think it's using more of it.
yeah,
Where does it make sense for me? Where does it make sense to leverage my baking or non-baking ability, or you know where else can I embed it into what I do every day, just so
yeah.
that I'm continuing to learn and I'm continuing to see the benefits so that I can promote that as well.
What's the best downhill track for one of the ski runs that you go on,
Oh,
right?
that's amazing. Yes, I
Yeah,
might have to
yeah.
use that this weekend.
Alina, how about you? Where are you going with your exploration of this technology there with the city?
There are two focus areas. The first being, let's understand how we want to use it. Let's put some guardrails around it. We already actually gave some recommendations on, hey, don't do these, top five things, right?
Yeah,
Just basically, just don't do these things, or don't put your personal information in there. Check, double check, triple check, just to make sure what you're using makes sense, is accurate, is not, uh, some untruth that can't be undone somehow.
yeah,
And then what I want to do is, well, continue to learn every day. I want to learn something new every day, right? And manage my excitement again with that ability to use it in a responsible way, because it can become so overwhelming and out of control. But I also want to learn what our, the city's other departments see as opportunities
yeah,
for using this technology in their internal operations,
hmm,
and to make the lives of our community members better,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because there are so many, again, opportunities for using this technology. It, they're endless opportunities. It's just, can we start small and build on that and just have a plan for doing that? So
yeah.
creating a framework within which we can um, do that in a repeatable way, and learn from it.
Well, Alina, I'm going to stick with you. What are one or two things our listeners should do tomorrow because they listened to our conversation today?
Think about three things, or think about three steps that they want to take on their journey.
Yeah.
Define them and think about them. Find some substantiating information,
Hmm.
right? And and then use those three steps to
Yeah.
get to the fourth.
Yep. Yep. I like that. Plan it out, right?
Yeah,
You have a destination in mind as you're
right.
taking those steps.
Yep.
I love that. Alita, how about you? What are one or two things our listeners should do tomorrow because they listened to us today?
I think that when you come across something either at work or at home and you want to know more, maybe instead of Googling it, enter it into Chat GPT,
Yeah.
right? Use
Yeah.
that as a tool and see what kind of result or see what kind of possibility comes out of that. I
Yeah.
think that would be something that is, kind of just substitute that for a while and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
see. And then, it'll be intriguing, I'm sure. And
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
based on that, take that and experiment with it. Kind of to Alina's point, you're going to learn more, what's next for you. Because it's gonna give you things that you haven't thought about. So take those things that you didn't come to top of mind, but drill down on those things and see where you can experiment with that and what kind of outcomes can you drive, using things that you hadn't considered, but AI had.
Yeah. Well, I think based on our conversation, the answer to the question of to AI or not to AI, the answer is to AI responsibly.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, totally agree.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you both very much for joining us again on Status Go. I love our conversations. I learn something new every time. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us. Yes.
To our listeners, if you have a question or want to learn more, visit intervision.com. The show notes will provide links and contact information. This is Jeff Tunn for Alina Walters and Aleta Jeffress. Thank you very much for listening.
You've been listening to the Status Go podcast. You can subscribe on iTunes or get more information at intervision.com. If you'd like to contribute to the conversation, find Intervision on Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter. Thank you for listening. Until next time.